gesprek met James Randi.
I'm going to give one piece of black paper out here. I have to use somebody that I don't know, and I know a number of people up front here. This fellow's too ugly. I can't use him. No, I know most of these people up front, so we'll have to choose somebody that I've never spoken to before. Have I? Yes, I have. Have I ever spoken to you before, sir? Are you sure?
I think so.
How do you know it's me? See? I could be somebody else altogether. You don't know.
Welcome, Mr. Randi. Welcome in Belgium. Perhaps you're more famous in the States than in Europe, so perhaps it's a good idea to start that you introduce yourself a little bit. And
you just hurt my feelings, but that's all right. My feelings are frequently hurt. Well, my name is James Randi. I am a magician by trade. That's my basic profession, and for a good 50 years of my life, I traveled around the world doing a magic act, mostly as an escape artist, hanging in straitjackets and breaking out of jails and things like that, all quite legitimately, of course. And during that time, I was increasingly asked questions by academics about various things that appeared to be psychic or supernatural or paranormal, and my answers often interested them because I had a different point of view on it. I eventually got to test some psychics and found out that they weren't psychic at all, that they were, in most cases, making mistakes by not examining their own powers properly with double-blind tests. That inspired me to begin doing a lecture on the subject, and by the time I was 55 years or so old, and that was a good 10 years ago, 12 years ago now, I managed to convert my whole profession over to that of lecturing, and I appear internationally doing exactly that for various academic groups, and also for commercial purposes and whatnot, in order to acquaint people with the fact that the claims of the psychics and the parapsychologists are not necessarily what appears in the media.
yeah, you've been traveling all over the world. You've seen Europe, the States. Is there any difference between the frequency, the appearance, the way they present themselves, these paranormal facts and people?
Their presentation might be different, their approach to doing it, but fundamentally it's all the same thing. There are variations in it. For example, in England, the spiritualist phenomena is very, very big. Everyone believes they can call up their dead ancestors and whatnot. In the United States, only a couple of states like Florida and California will have that really going for them actively. I find that the dowsing phenomena, the business with the fork stick or with the pendulum or with the rod or whatever, is very popular all through Europe, not used very much in the United States, though it is present. Dowsing is something that's pretty well universal. I find it in every part of the world, much more in Europe than I do in the United States of America. But it's used for different purposes. It's used for police work in some cases. It never works. In fact, it doesn't work whether it's used for finding water or for finding treasure or for locating lost children. It simply doesn't work, but the belief in it is very strong, regardless of the validity of the claims. So the nature of it changes, the flavor of it changes, but essentially the whole world is saturated in belief in the paranormal.
Yeah, there are many different things that happen that are paranormal or just strange claims, but could you give a definition of what's quackery or pseudoscience, and are these things which you have to take serious and try to get rid of, or is it just to take a laugh?
Well, the point is that there has never been a positive parapsychological experiment in the history of science. There are parapsychologists who have been around for almost 100 years now, and they, strangely enough, have never had one positive experiment. And a positive experiment is defined as one that has statistically significant results that has been replicated independently by another agency without a vested interest in it. Now, if that's the case, it's very much as if the parapsychologists were in the medical profession. A doctor, for example, who has been in business for 80 years, and every one of his patients has died. Wouldn't you think that doctor would decide somewhere along the line to get a different profession, like a lift operator or a construction worker or a dentist maybe, but not someone on whose skill lives may depend? It's very strange that they keep at parapsychology, though that is the basic nature of science. You don't give up because you don't have positive results, but after a certain period of time, you may look around and say, maybe there's nothing to this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the famous things you collaborated in was trying to find out if Jacques Benveniste really found something. Perhaps you could tell a little bit what that was about.
Well, briefly, because it is a very long story. Nature magazine a few years back ran an article, a paper that is, by Jacques Benveniste in Clamart, France, in which he said that he had obtained positive results over a 5-year period. He said about those experiments that they were done double-blind, that they were independently replicated, and that the results would stand examination, that there wasn't any problem, you could look at the books and all this kind of thing. Well, it turned out that that wasn't quite true. They said also they had no negative results. There were lots of negative results, but those results always had written at the bottom of the page, bad water, stale reagents, bad attitude on the part of the experimenter or whatever. There was always some reason why the experiments didn't work, and therefore they just simply didn't count them. They were not done double-blind, they were done single-blind. And unless an experiment is done double-blind, where no one knows what the expected outcome is, and no one doing the analysis or the summation of the report knows what the result is supposed to be, you haven't got a scientific experiment. Now that's not always possible in every scientific experiment. In astronomy, for example, hey, an eclipse happens and boom. You can't have them do that again, you see. It's not like working in television where you can say, take two. It doesn't work that way. So not all science is subject to that, but when it's possible, you should be doing it that way. Also, we found out that the independent replication that was claimed by Benveniste lab was not independent at all. It was done by homeopathic laboratories. That's not independent. And when we looked at the results that they had presented, we found out they were not replications of the original experiments. And we also found out that the personnel traveled from Benveniste's lab with suitcases full of chemicals and such and went to the different location. It wasn't done by the other laboratories. It was done by them in a different location. So the experiments fell apart as far as the validity of the paper went. But we went there, and for 3 days we did our experiments. We watched them for 1 day doing the experiments under their circumstances. We found out it was not double-blind, so the second day we did double-blind it by disguising the samples with alternate numbers. We randomized them very effectively, and the result they got, instead of big peaks like this of effectiveness of the chemical, or the water I should say, because there's no chemical there, was just level like that. It was a bumpy line that was well within the error bars. It simply meant that they didn't have any results, at least on that day. And if we can go there and do it double-blind on 1 day with their people doing the actual experimentation and the cell count and such, there's something very wrong. But they haven't changed their minds. They still believe that homeopathy works.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that the problem? As soon as Jacques Benveniste claims something, it comes in the newspapers all over the world. Afterwards, you come or other people come and they disprove it, and nobody talks about it anymore. Well, everybody still believes it works.
That's right, and it continues that way. Now, for example, many years ago, New Scientist magazine ran an article on dowsing. And it started off, the first line in it was, "Dowsing works, that much is certain, period." And they went ahead for a 2-page article with 3 illustrations, photographic illustrations, full of data. The data was 100% positive. There were 200 tests done where the possibility was 1 in 2, 50%, and they got exactly 200 correct answers. It was remarkable until we looked into it a little closer. We found out that the experiment had been done by one person who randomized by throwing a coin as to whether the current was going to be off or on in the wire, and he was the one who turned the switch on and then took the dowsing rod. I'm not surprised that he got 100% results. So we asked him to do it again, and this is a case of somebody fooling themselves. In the second set of tests of 100 tests, he got 49 right and 51 wrong. In the second set of tests, he got 49 wrong and 51 right. Add them together, you got 100, 100, exactly down the middle, and he gave up his claim. But how was that run in New Scientist? A single paragraph like this, 2.5 years after the original paper. But the dowsers are still repeating that first paper. Yeah. They're not talking about the second one.
Don't we have a problem here if even journalists that should be specialized in science and scientists themselves are so easily deceived by so-called facts?
Well, they're deceived by themselves.
What can we expect from the lay people if they read something or hear a claim or go to a psychic healer or whatever?
That's the point. Of course, scientists are as easily fooled by themselves as they are by anybody else. And scientists who say, oh, I never took my eyes off it, for example. We've seen some of the experiments that were done at Stanford Research Institute in California. They were done with Mr. Uri Geller. And we were very impressed by those. And I will admit that if the initial reports that came out of SRI on Uri Geller were actually factually correct, then I think that they have established that he has psychic powers. There's no question of it. However, what we don't know and didn't know until recently was that those were not experiments. They were demonstrations that Mr. Geller gave, and they rewrote them as if they were experiments. Now that's very much like going to David Copperfield and saying, Mr. Copperfield, I'd like you to take this blue box here with these blades and place a young lady in there and cut her in 2 pieces, separate the 2 halves of the box and put them back together again. Would you like to do that? Sure, says David Copperfield, and does it. That's not what happens. He does that, and you don't later write it up as if you challenged him to do that with this particular box under these circumstances of lighting and audio effects. That's not what happened. But if you rewrite it, it sounds like an earth-shaking experience. In that case, you would have to believe that David Copperfield really can cut a woman in 2 pieces and put her back together again.
You've been battling with Uri Geller already for many years now, I think. How's the state of the art now in that?
Well, he sued me recently, in recent years, for $30 million. I can tell you right now, that's not a reasonable figure to sue me for. It's not realistic, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
To come up with $30 million, I'd really have to scrape around and borrow a lot of money from my friends. It's a joke to sue somebody for that amount of money that they know can never be come up with, but American law is built in such a way that everything is hyperbolized. And it cost me, in the long run, about $240,000 over a 5-year period to defend myself against these charges. Geller won only 1 case, and that was in Japan, because I refused to go to Japan. I didn't have the money. I couldn't afford another $50,000 or $75,000 to defend myself in Japan, so I lost the case by default. They gave him 1/3 of 1% of what he was asking for, and the final decision was that he didn't have any right to pick up anything. He had to give up that right.
Yeah. Still, he was bending spoons.
Yes.
You know, you know as a magician how you can do that kind of things. You can even demonstrate it, I guess.
These are tricks that kids get off the back of cornflake boxes, the kind of tricks that they get off the back of cornflake boxes. And apparently scientists either don't eat cornflakes or they don't read the back of the box. Or perhaps if they read the back of the box, they forget it or they don't understand it. I'm not sure. You got me, here we are. You got me a spoon. Where did this spoon come from, by the way?
From the restaurant here.
From the restaurant. Well, it says on it, Enoch's in a way. There must be a man named Enoch who makes a lot of spoons, I'm not sure. Well, let's do a little demonstration here. If we can just perhaps slope down, I'll move the table a little closer to myself. Now this is a Enoch's or stainless spoon, a steel spoon, and it looks pretty thick. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hold it like this between my fingers, and I'm going to massage it very gently. In fact, I'll put the end of it on my knee so we have it very clearly in. Do you get a good picture that way? All right. I'll just bend it back and forth very slightly, just flexing it. Well, like I'm going to flex it like this, but I'm going to do it while it's on my knee, all right? Watch. You'll get the illusion, I think, that either my knee is moving or the spoon seems to be getting flexible.